Welcome to the Buffalo Reformed Podcast. We are a collective of Reformed Christians who meet monthly to discuss theology, culture, politics, and education. My name is Aaron Masters. I'm a pastor at Covenant Reformed Church in Western New York. I am joined by my co-hosts, Nicholas Wells, a fellow pastor at Covenant Reformed Church, and Josh DeGroff, one of our congregants. The Buffalo Reformed Podcast exists to connect and encourage like-minded brothers and sisters in Western New York as we work to see this region won for Christ. We encourage our listeners to seek this goal by being devoted to Christ, to their family, to their community, and to their local church. In this episode, we discuss the recent election of Donald Trump and the associated momentum his victory brings to the Christian community. We then discuss the main theme of the episode, mission. The Westminster Shorter Catechism says that the chief end of man is to glorify God and to enjoy Him forever. This chief end, or purpose of man, can also be described in terms of mission, and we discuss what this might mean individually for us, as well as for our households and our communities. I hope you enjoy this episode of the Buffalo Reformed Podcast. Welcome back to the Buffalo Reformed Podcast. This is our second episode, which we are recording on the day prior to, or the day after Election Day. Pretty exciting times around here. And this episode is set to release on Monday. As you all know, we're doing one episode per month. You should be released on the second Monday of every month. And last time we talked about worship. The topic for this episode is going to be mission, but I do want to take some time and discuss reactions and reflections on what we witnessed yesterday with the election of Donald J. Trump as the 47th President of the United States. I was not expecting that. I thought it was going to be a lot closer than it was, but pretty early on in the evening, it was looking like a lot of states were turning red that I was not really even expecting. The swing states, especially Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, and even Virginia was close for a long time into the race, and then that did end up going blue. But how closely did you guys pay attention to it? What were your reactions during?
I tried not to pay much attention to it at all, largely because of 2020. Because when I went to bed at 2020, Trump looked like he had it, and then in the morning he didn't.
That's
and then
exactly,
it was this long extended thing, and it was just a mess. So I was hopeful, and I liked what I was seeing, but obviously there was that hesitancy of accepting and that this was really going the direction I was hoping it would go. But it's exciting. It's exciting not only to have the better candidate get into office who's also going to put in way better people into the different positions of government. We will have like-minded people in certain positions with this administration coming in. But not only that, you also now have the full power of Congress too. Now, I have my reservations because I know how Republicans have done that in the past. They've done nothing. They get the power and then they don't know what to do with it.
Do you think, though, that, this is Trump's second term. He doesn't have another shot after this. He kind of knew what to expect. He knows what to expect going into it now, whereas he didn't before. Do you think things are going to be a little bit different this go around?
Well, there will be, in the sense that he's going to have better people in his cabinet. He's going to have better people. Like all of those, I forget what the exact number was, but I think it's somewhere around 6. He had like 6 positions that he had people filled in for, where Hillary had like 1,000.
Yeah.
And so he was not prepared. As much as he likes to say, "Oh yeah, I expected to win." Well, when you've only got 6 people, it's like you did not expect to win. But this time he's said, I'm ready. I know I've learned my lessons. I know what I'm doing now. So that's going to be a lot better. But yeah, you still got to have Congress. We are a three-branch government, and he can do executive orders, but they are short-lasting. They will only last as long as he's president. So they aren't really a long-term fixed anything, although they could be effective, especially with the immigration.
Do you know what's big though is there's and they were talking about this on the Daily Wire yesterday. There's two justices who are kind of up there in age, Clarence Thomas and Alito.
Yep.
And they may take the opportunity under a conservative president to retire.
Yes.
If that happens, now we get two more young justices in there, then we have the majority for a long time
Yes.
on the courts. I think that's huge. But then to your first point, my wife and I did not want to go to bed until we knew that it was called for Trump, because that's exactly what happened in 2020. We left the party at like 10 p.m. We're like, oh, he's got this in the bag, and then they stopped counting.
Yep.
And then you wake up the next morning, and all the states that looked like they were going red were all blue. So crazy.
Speaking of which,
Yes.
I just looked at that podcast I was listening to on the way over here, and DeMar said, you look at how many people vote in the elections.
Yes.
This year's election is the same as what 2016 was, 2012. Go all the way down. Very similar number of people voting. 2020 had 20 million more voters than any of the other elections.
That's right.
Before or after.
That's right. Yeah, Trump got a record number of votes in 2020 election, and so did Biden. It's like the fishiness of that is just that does not pass the whiff test, not at all. Somebody, this was kind of on Twitter a lot today, but the number of people that turned out for Trump today and then for Harris, and comparing that to all the other prior elections, 2020 was an anomaly. It's very clear to see. Like, it's just obvious now. That doesn't put a lot of confidence in what happened in 2020, but
we made it through it.
We made it through it, and now Trump is president again. So,
and we've got Vance, who seems to have a really good head on his shoulders.
Yes,
so
he's
don't
sharp.
Go trying to take out Trump, because now you have to deal with Vance.
That's right. Vance is sharp. Well,
I'd rather have Vance, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think that Vance actually is a little bit more conservative when it comes to abortion.
Yes.
Than Trump is. So I would agree with that. I like what people are saying though. It would be great if now they're like, yeah, so Project 2025, that was actually a thing. Yeah, we're going to do it now. That'd be great. Bring Musk in for the Department of Government Efficiency.
Doge.
Wells, what were your thoughts? Reactions?
I'm surprised there was not civil unrest. I'm surprised that there were not more shenanigans. You did see certain places where there were ballots being brought in after hours and things like that were being reported on. But I think that it helped that Trump had so many lawyers in different places prepared for the shenanigans. I'm genuinely surprised that they were not more successful at cheating. And because I believe that we did win the last election as well. So Trump is probably the only president in U.S. history, I believe, to win 3 elections.
Except for FDR, but we won't count him because he was, borderline communist. So
Right. Well, point being, Trump did extraordinarily well. And the reason I'm so excited about this situation that I never thought I would see in our lifetime or ever in this country at this point with how far we've gone is that it was no longer liberal versus conservative, because you had the liberals going to Trump and you had some conservatives going to Kamala. And what it really was, in my opinion, and I hope it's true, is establishment candidate Kamala versus the anti-establishment candidate Trump. And Aaron, you and I were talking about this, and Trump spent the first couple of years of his presidency learning what it means to be president. He is not a politician by trade. He's a businessman. He's very effective. But when he walked into it, I don't think he was prepared to win. I don't think he thought he was going to win. And his whole cabinet was just recommendations by the swamp. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to drain the swamp, but the swamp was the one telling him what to do. That's no longer the case. So Trump is walking in with some key picks and with people picked out for things. I think Elon, as funny as it is that all the leftists were like, oh, he's going to kill Twitter, and he did. He put it to death. He brought X out of it, and it's a much more efficient, much more favorable platform now than it ever was as Twitter. And I think that everything Elon's touched has essentially turned to gold. So I think the Department of Government Efficiency is going to be an excellent thing for the state of our country. I also think that Kennedy is great for the health thing. I mean, just think of all the stuff in our country that we allow that other countries don't, like with artificial food dyes and all these ingredients, and whether they be chemicals or whatever, that are illegal to have in food in other countries. So I think that Kennedy is going to do an excellent job, and I've heard that there was actually a call today between various pharmaceutical companies that are concerned about him because he actually wants to remove advertising for drugs from television and from I don't know if they do radio. I think they do as well. So he wants, yeah. So he wants to overturn that whole process, which will be just gouging their pockets. And then you got Tulsi Gabbard, who I think is just phenomenal whenever she talks. I don't really know what she's going to do for his cabinet particularly. Vance is just a knockout. He's
sharp.
He did so well in every debate. He puts everybody to shame. And I think Trump was, when he talked about him on his winning speech, when he was talking up Vance, he was talking about how like other people are afraid to go into these CNN interviews because, or these liberal interviews because they know they're going to come after him. And JD just walks in and shuts him down because he's such a sharp guy, such a smart guy. And it's just amazing to me that the first time I ever heard of him was his book Hillbilly Elegy.
Yes.
And just this kid from rural Appalachia with a family like his can, rise up and become the vice president and very likely become president in 4 years.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Tremendous.
It's just rare because a lot of times vice presidents do not achieve that.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
Biden had to cheat to get that accomplished. But you look in history, vice presidents usually do not win. It's weird. I don't know why, you would think, but it was I think it was Van Buren was the last one before Bush #1.
Yeah.
That was how big of a gap there was between a vice president. The only reason Truman got in there is because FDR died, and then that started his whole process of being elected.
Yeah.
But the first time election, it was like Van Buren, and then it was Bush.
Yep.
So a huge gap there. But one thing you said that makes me think of something is the shift that's going on with the non-establishment and the establishment. And you got a lot of Christians that are kind of like, oh, I don't know, they're taking the Republican Party in a wrong direction. And I agree that in certain parts it is, but we have to play the long game. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, this kind of goes into our discussion of maybe dispensational thinking versus post-millennial thinking and everything in between, is they are very short-sighted. But if we think in the long game, we're kind of seeing the pendulum swing back. So we always talk, people do talk, maybe not always, but people do talk about back in the day, morals were generally the same. It was more just, some economical differences between the Democrats and Republicans. Well, that's not the case today. Mm-hmm. But if we can get the majority of Americans to come under this more populist idea that the Republican Party is starting to undertake, it's probably going to eventually drown out the Democratic Party. Then from there, you can split that Republican, whatever it becomes, back into almost what Democrat-Republican differences were 100 years ago.
I think that will happen. And I think Andrew Klavan was making this point that Trump is actually a moderate candidate when you think about all these issues, because he's pro-LGBTQ and he's pro-choice. So like those, we would not historically vote for a candidate that supports those things.
It's Bill Clinton.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. But what he did essentially is because he's taking those stances that would typically be taken by a Democrat, he pushes the Democratic Party way farther to the left. So now they are shown to be as radical as they actually are in terms of the left as a party. That party's going to die. It is going to die. Mm-hmm. But you are going to see, I think, exactly what you described, where the Judeo-Christian evangelical crowd, they're going to cause a split within the Republican Party. And then I don't know how it's going to play out in terms of our two-party system. That's going to be interesting to watch.
Could get to 3, which would be pretty wild.
That would be, wouldn't it? Interesting.
Actually make things a little bit more exciting, in my opinion.
I agree. I agree. Yes. Just a couple of real quick things we can follow up with some of the things you guys are saying. I think what we saw in the election yesterday is the news media as a propaganda machine is not as effective as it once was, because you had over 70 million Americans that they not only didn't do what the media was telling them to do, but they got up and they did the opposite. So they didn't vote for Harris and Joy, but they voted for Trump and misogyny and racism from their perspective. They did the exact opposite, even in the face of a label like that: sexist, misogynist, racist, Nazi, like all those labels that are getting thrown at them. Still, 70 million Americans still got up and went and voted for Trump. I think that's big, because that means that a lot of these secondary news outlets and things like Joe Rogan or the Daily Wire, or even Crowder and his crowd, and a lot of people that are like that.
Russell Brand,
yep. And X in a big way, because that's like where all the information and news is being spread right now. I think that's way more effective than the legacy news media is at this point.
Well, and just a quick funny point. We were talking earlier today that the leftist mainstream media outlets have changed their tune very quickly to praising Trump for the stock market changes that have happened. But I even saw and shared a story from, I don't know the outlet, it might have been CNN, where they were saying they were legitimately trying to say that it was actually the Republicans that were calling Trump a Nazi and a fascist.
Yeah.
They're trying to take everything that they did and foist it onto the Republicans. And the main thing that I hope Trump does, just because I'm sick of hearing it more than anything, because clearly the American people aren't buying it at this point. They're drinking their own Kool-Aid, but it just becomes a vicious cycle for them where they believe their own lies. And then when, like, the average American, the popular vote goes to Trump and everything goes to Trump, and Republicans, it's like they're dumbfounded by it. I truly hope that their ministry of truth and, like the Orwellian ministry of truth dies away. At the end of the day, they're just gaslighting the American people. They're gaslighting themselves. And, everything that they're seeing the Republicans are doing, those are the things that they did, and they need to own them. And that's why nobody cares about them and nobody thinks they have anything relevant to say, because very few liberal media outlets ever are willing to say that they're wrong and then jump on the bus.
I think I wanted to say I disagreed with you in a text earlier on the idea of shutting down their lies, but I agree in the fact that not necessarily like passing some kind of law or anything like that, because that's not gonna help. That's actually gonna make it worse. It's better to let the American people, which I think this election has shown that they're not listening to you anymore. But that when we say holding them accountable, then let's start seeing some actual libel suits come into play.
Yes.
And actually start to take these people, because who was it? Somebody just won a lawsuit for something like that.
Rogan sued a news outlet recently, or a couple different times actually in the last couple of years, I think, for defamation.
That's the direction to go. Even these news outlets. I mean, Trump could go to court, I think, for a lot of these. I mean, even Obama still spewing, just this last week, spewing the same garbage about, there were good people on both sides, going back to the incident down in South Carolina years ago.
Yeah, right.
Still saying that, even though that's been fact-checked multiple times.
Well, I think what this points to is, and I think that there is a need for this, is honesty when it comes to public figures. And that's something that people appreciated about Trump, and they're willing to look past a lot of his flaws, because whenever he jumps on the debate stage, he says things off the cuff, and you can tell that he's just saying what's actually on his mind. He's not posturing for a particular reason.
Yeah.
Whenever he says, because you'd be in jail.
Right.
Authenticity.
That's what people are looking for in leadership, particularly political leadership, where we have this veneer right now, and people are just not trusting of what's happening. They think that there's always an ulterior motive, and that's because there usually is. There usually is an ulterior motive. Well, so then that gets to the next question. which would be, okay, Trump has been elected. We have like we've been talking about, hopefully the economy gets better. That's something we didn't discuss, but hopefully the economy improves. The thing we did discuss, the justices, hopefully we'll be able to put in place so that we have a corner on justice from a somewhat moral perspective for a long time. What are some things that we can do to push forward in our community, and maybe even with our families, but particularly with our community, that will keep the momentum moving in the right direction? That's the question.
Yeah, well, I can tell you what I want to do because I just moved here and I've been thinking about this for a little while. There's so many different things we could do. There's a Christian coffee shop owned by a Christian man. And if you go to their website, they're closed on Sunday, and he states that their mission is essentially to, advance Christ. Like, it's clear on their website that they care first and foremost about Christ. And that's the kind of guy that I want to get to know. What if we could do like a psalm sing at the cafe, or, do some kind of homily there or something, just build that relationship up. Whether it's a Bible study, again, the psalm sing, whatever it is, have that be like a center where the various Christians from various churches can kind of come work together, support a local Christian business, and also build our bonds and serve our community, as a collective of the church in whatever way the community needs. There's another brewery that opened up just down the road, and that's a great opportunity because there's going to be opportunities to do psalm sings there, have a bunch of people, Christians out in this area, come and gather, again, support that business, sing songs. There should be, non-Christian people there getting exposure to that. I know there are other churches in the CREC that do these things, and they generally have very good turnouts. So, and it's a good witness because, if the Christians go and they tip well and they leave the place nicer than it was when they got there and stuff, it's a good witness for Christ.
So two things that I'm hearing you say are support local businesses. That's number one. And
Yep.
so have a more local mindset. Yep. And then number two, be present as a Christian in your community.
Yeah. And I think that's the big difference between like Big Eva and then I would say a more culturally reformed movement, more, you could even say it's like a 2K versus a Kuyperian mindset, where from my perspective, being Kuyperian, I believe that there's a lot of stock we should place in our local communities, and we shouldn't just be doing evangelism in our local communities when it's convenient. We should be building up our local community, investing in our local communities so that the community is improved. And then the more you do that, the more people know you. And then when, something difficult or bad happens, who are they going to go to? They're going to go to the person who offers the most hope and who is stable.
Yeah, and that is very much similar to what the way I was thinking about it as well. I think we need to start being active in local politics as a church. I think the Christian community needs to be much more active in local politics than we have been, just in general. And then we need to start businesses and support businesses, particularly Christian ones. But yeah, having that local mindset, I think, is crucial. But
so just real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Another example, even just like, because I want to get to know all the ministers in the area. If it's a gospel preaching church, I want to get to know their minister, and anybody who wants to partner to serve the community, I want to do that. The other week, I think last week, there was a fire on the main street just up on 19 in Warsaw. And how great of a witness would it have been if there was this coalition of pastors or whomever, these Christians from all different denominations, different churches that live locally here, and could have gathered together to do some kind of charity for the people who no longer can live in their apartments, who are displaced, who don't have their clothing and all these things. Like, yes, they should be insured. At this point in time, we live in an era where we have insurance, and you have insurance for things like this. But to be the hands and feet of Christ, to go into a community, to go to the broken people in the community, I think that the church needs to do those things. And it's just like, who makes clinics for people to come and get health care when they don't? Historically, it's been the Christians. The Christians are the ones that do those things for the community, for the advancement of the gospel as well. So
yes,
a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, a ton. Anything you want to add to that, Josh, before I add another point here?
Not really. I mean, that's pretty much because I think that's the right avenue to take. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, I mean, supporting your local businesses and being involved in your
Right.
local community.
Right.
I can tell you that that's something that has been weighing heavier on my mind over the last year or two, especially getting more of an understanding of what the CREC promotes and pushes for versus what I was used to in the more, and I would say radical two kingdom versus just two kingdom. There is a difference there. The radical two kingdom idea, and let me just stay in my shell. I'll honor God. I'll read my Bible every day. I'll go to church on Sunday. I'll go to Bible studies in the middle of the week. But I'm gonna stay in my little home that's safe and
Holy huddle.
Yes, and I will not get myself in the community and either the Lord's gonna rapture me or I'll just quietly die as an old man. And I don't. That's not what we were called to. We were called to disciple the nations. So, with that being said, I am trying to be more mindful, and my wife does help me with that. She does help me to be a little bit more outgoing, even though we both are very introverted in a sense of we do like to be homebodies. But, I say that because she pushed me to be a coach even for Jackson's baseball team, and that was a town ball, So here I am. I'm with these kids that I would never see otherwise. They go to public school.
Right.
Get to be a participating coach with that.
Yep.
I coach with another believer that I used to fellowship with at the local church in Perry, so I was coaching with him, but we were also coaching with another guy that I wouldn't necessarily say is saved at all. Kind of one of those guys that his wife seems to have a walk, but he doesn't. So you've got that, to be an example there.
That's great, actually.
So,
local sports and town sports particularly, and being involved with your kids. I grew up playing those sports. And that's a great opportunity, because then you do have a little bit of a mentorship role over the kids that are on the team. Yeah, that's absolutely.
And you're seeing people that you like. I saw people that I hadn't seen in years, just years. I hadn't seen these people. So there is, and I even in the back of my mind, my niece that got married, it was a wedding venue at a barn, and the man who owns that. I grew up with a son, graduated with a son, and his son has actually reached out to me a few times via text to get together for like breakfast or lunch, and we haven't done it. But I mean, that spurs me to think of that again. It's like let's reach out to these people.
Right.
Where are you at? Where are you at with God and Christ especially? And where can we take you and where can we help you? And just doing those little outreaches. I think sometimes I can fall into the trap of you're thinking too big and looking up at the peak of the mountain and not realizing that I just got to take the steps that are in front of me first. Yes. And eventually you'll get there.
Yeah. And this is good. The topic for this episode is mission. And in light of the election results and the situation that we now find ourselves with, this opportunity, it seems like socially, these are some things that we can practically do. The personal mission steps we can take to try and accomplish a goal or see the vision actually come to fruition. Something else that was talked about, I think, on the Cross Politic election coverage was we need to be better at persuading people rather than just stating or proclaiming to people. And there is a time to proclaim, so I'm not denying that. But and this is something that I talked about in the sermon on Sunday. When we're talking to people in the community about things, particularly politics, how good are we at knowing how the scriptures ought to affect our view of a particular policy politically? Whether it's social welfare, what's the state's role in being a safety net for people that have no way to protect themselves or provide for themselves some basic things like food, shelter, heat, things like that. Does the government have a role in that? From the Christian perspective, ought the government have a role in that? Or is that the church and the household that's supposed to be doing that? Like that, those more basic civic questions, how well equipped are we to address those issues from a Christian perspective? And then not only do that, but then also in doing that, prove to the person that the rule of Christ is always going to be better. It's always going to be better. Christ has the answer to social welfare. Now, I know that because I'm a Christian, but I would need to prove that to somebody who's not a Christian. Like, why does turning to Christ actually mean in the long run, maybe not immediately, because we all know that that's not true. If you give your life to Christ, your life actually usually gets harder. But in the long run, in the grand scheme, the meaningfulness of being a Christian is obviously better than the meaninglessness of the alternatives like nihilism. So how good are we at proclaiming the truth, but then persuading the people that are our opponents that this is the better way? Those kinds of public square debates. I do think that we need to be a little bit better at that. That's something that I've been really trying to think through, especially at work, because you end up, you get into conversations with people, and then they're telling you their issues and different things or problems they have with the candidates and their stance on things. And then if you can actually give a reasonable explanation for a particular policy and then ground that in, this is what the Bible says about this, and then I'm going to take this biblical principle and I'm going to apply it to this policy, and that's how I have arrived at my conclusion. Mm-hmm. People respond well to that.
And that would probably everything you just said would probably fall under apologetics, right?
Yes.
That's basically what we're talking about here.
I think it would fall under apologetics, but it also falls, I would put it actually under like theonomic heading. I think those two things are related. The reason I say theonomic is because I think that a lot of policy issues are actually going to be addressed by the law of God. And then we have case law in the Old Testament, book of Exodus, the book of Numbers, that give us examples of how things were dealt with in that community using God's law. And so then we can extrapolate from that principles to apply to our current context. Now, I'm not saying that we need to try and reconstruct our American society in a way that would rebuild what Israel was constituted as in the Old Testament. I'm not saying that, but I do think that there would be a lot of similarities between how you apply the law of God in that society, how they did that, and then how we would apply the moral law of God in our society. It's going to look kind of similar, but even just as an example of what I'm trying to express here, if you read through the larger catechism on the Ten Commandments, there is so much that they extrapolate from each command, even the command of thou shalt not kill, what that means. And if you say it negatively, it's a restriction on taking life. But it's also a restriction on anything that might lead to the taking of life or the harming of somebody else. But then you'd have the positive spin on that, like what are we doing to actually promote the welfare of somebody else? So all of those things that you can extrapolate from one single simple command, and then what the downstream ramifications of that might be in terms of policy.
And really, even like when you say that, looking at the positive side of the commandment, that's no different than what Christ said in his commandment as well.
Yes.
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
That's right.
And doing the positive approach, because I think they say, oh, well, Buddha said, or Confucius, one of them was like, don't do unto others what you don't want them to do to you. And Jesus took the opposite. Well, Jesus took the better approach because
Yes.
he is better. But
he says, you love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and you love your neighbor as yourself, and that fulfills the law. That's the first table of the law and the second table of the law, and it's said in a positive way, And a quick example of that would be the redistribution of private property. If society doesn't recognize private property, then that's actually going against the eighth commandment, which is thou shalt not steal.
Right.
Because if you're stealing something, it presupposes that somebody owns it. And so if somebody owns it, then that presupposes private property. And so that's a particular policy position then that's generally more conservative, more Republican, that's directly taken from the law of God and some of the presuppositions in the law of God towards these social type things, which is grounded in transcendent morality, which is God saying this is what's right, this is what's wrong, and that's based on His word essentially. So my point being, what are we growing in our knowledge personally? And this is really the first part of the podcast, which we've taken a while to get to, 37 minutes later. But in this mission, like we have this opportunity to push, and we've already laid out a bunch of good things that we can do in the community to be more present and to take advantage of this opportunity. But what are we going to do personally to lead our families and to be present in our community, what's our personal mission? We know our chief end is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever. And so I'm using mission in that same sense. What are we doing? And I think one thing, if I was going to harp on anything in this episode, it would be this, is we need to know how the law of God applies in our current political and social moment. And we need to be able to communicate that to people that we come in contact with on a daily basis, just at the drop of a hat. And if we're able to do that, then debate is going to be easy, because we would be so well versed in these things because we're talking about them, we're thinking about them all the time, that we can then persuade someone that we come across in the public sphere with truth, with biblical truth that is relevant to them. I think that would be a very powerful way of moving forward from a personal perspective. That's one of the reasons why that's how I use Twitter generally. So I do engage with people on Twitter, but usually I'm going through some resource and then I'm posting quotes from the resource. So right now I'm going through the Ten Commandments and I'm posting quotes or commentary on the Ten Commandments from Calvin, from the Heidelberg Catechism, from the Larger Catechism, the Westminster Larger Catechism. Thomas Watson, the Puritan, he wrote a commentary series, which is a bunch of sermons actually on the Ten Commandments. And then Rushdoony. And I think Rushdoony is super thorough when it comes to his treatment of the commandments. But all of those are, my aim in doing that is more so for myself to just get a familiarity with, okay, this is what the commandment says. What does that mean? Mm-hmm. And then how Calvin treated that, how the Westminster Divines treated that, how the Puritans treated that, and then how somebody that's a little bit closer to our time in the 20th century anyway treated that. And then that, I think, will help give me a better understanding of how I might think that will help. I mean, it's going to help in every area, like in the household, because the law of God comes to bear in the household every day, in the church, as we lead the church and as we're present in the church, and then even in society. If the Lord wills that we have people in our church or in our community that end up running for office, they need to know how the law of God is relevant to public policy.
Yep. No, that's good. And I think that's something where I personally would like to get a lot stronger at, because I'm pretty weak in that department. Like we talked about in the first podcast, I listen to a lot of different shows via podcast, but listening and retaining are two different things. It is important, and I think what you're doing when you are using X to write different quotes and different things that you've picked up from these different authors on the Ten Commandments is a big deal, because when you actually write it out yourself, you're more likely to remember it. Mm-hmm. I know that when I was teaching for 6 years, I taught on subjects that I had learned briefly in school, but until I had to teach it to somebody else, it didn't really stick. And even now that I've been removed from that position for 6 years, there's a lot I forgot because mm-hmm. I'm not regularly utilizing it.
That's right.
So it is important, I think, for anybody listening, and even for myself, is to at least start with a book. The Rushdoony one sounds good, but it might be thick, but it sounds like that'd be a good one. If he's thorough, then that might be a one-stop shop. And you take that book, you highlight it as you read through it, mm-hmm. and which I do, and I always have the thought that I'm going to go back and then take notes on the things that I highlighted. I think if I did that, I would retain it a lot more, and that's probably another step to take to help with these kind of situations.
Do you know, I think it was Wilson, he said, read a lot. Like, it's good to be well read, and don't be concerned with remembering everything that you read. And I think that's good. We can be free from the fact that, like, we're going to read. We should be reading a lot, and we shouldn't have that pressure on ourselves to retain everything. But I think, especially as Christians who are studying the Word of God, we want the principles of the Word to be a part of who we are. So it's just natural for us to think in a particular way because we're so saturated with what the Word of God says. So I think that's why it is important to know, we should be reading people that we want to learn from, I think, more frequently than we're reading the enemy. But I'm a big advocate for reading The Enemy. I think that we should read books that we disagree with, and we should interact with the rationales and the reasoning that they give, so that it's just sharpening for us. So then we know what arguments are effective, what arguments they're making that we maybe need to prepare to defend against. Those are things are all really good. But I think that presupposes we have a strong understanding of where we already are and what we already understand. So I would say reading a lot and reading in a particular vein is good. So, for example, if the law of God is what we're trying to grow in, then having 5 or 6 resources that you're going through, and just go through them and highlight, write, interact with them, debate. Have your group of people that you can give your controversial statements to, so that then they attack it in a good environment. That's a really important thing. You guys sharpen me, because then whenever we're at church and we're just kind of chit-chatting about things, then I can say, well, you know what I read this week that was really interesting, this, and then whatever the topic might be, and then we go back and forth about it, like what we were talking about on Sunday about as far as the curse is found. The question is, how far does the curse actually go? Does it affect the entire cosmos, or is it just the earth? That kind of a question. And so then you work through it and you give your arguments and you think through it. And it's maybe not even something that we really had thought about much prior to that conversation.
True.
So I think having that, a list of resources that you're working through on a particular topic, reading voraciously, and then engaging with like-minded brothers, and then also people that you disagree with on topics, on that particular topic, is all ways to get that kind of grounded into your system.
I will say for me, for anybody that may be listening to this who doesn't know my context, I have 7 children, I work a full-time job, bivocational pastor, got a lot going on. It is difficult for anybody who works a full-time job, who has a family, who has other obligations, to find the time to study sometimes. And the only time that I'm actually reviewing 5 to 6 resources on a subject is when I'm doing sermon prep.
Yeah.
I don't have the time to really get that granular in most things, especially if it's devotional in nature or something like that. And I would just say, depending on where you are, if you're a single guy or single gal who has all the time and resources to do something like what Aaron's talking about, then, go full bore, go ahead, do that thing if you think you can do it. One of the things we need to do is make sure that our study is sustainable. And if that's not sustainable for you, like Aaron's regimen, just truthfully is not sustainable for a person like me.
It's not for me either. I'm like Sherlock Holmes. So there's times whenever the game's afoot and I'm like all in. Yeah. And then there's other times when I'm just like, I don't want to read another word.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And that ebb and flow is a very real thing.
Yeah.
X keeps me consistent though. So
yeah, no, I appreciate how you use X as a tool in that regard. And that's kind of how I've used Substack in many ways. But I would just say your time is limited and precious. If you don't have much time, just find whoever resonates with you the most. For me, I really like Jim Jordan. I like Peter Lightheart. Really like Joel Beakey, Wilhelmus Abrachel. Find the best resource you can on any given topic and then dive into it. Then, look up some counterpoints, shore up your defenses, things like that. But, find the best resource you can on a topic. And then that's where I would recommend you invest your time and your energies if you can't do it from multiple sources.
Yeah, whenever I was first looking into covenant theology, I thought, I need something very simple that I can just use as my base text. So the book I got was Everyone's a Theologian by R.C. Sproul, which was exactly what I needed. I just started reading on the doctrine of the church and was looking at what he was teaching on covenant theology, and I used that as my base text. And then after I was like, okay, I think I kind of have a good grasp of this, then I moved on to Burkhoff and started reading a little bit on what his thoughts were on the sacraments and the church and everything. And then you end up at Beakey and his super thorough, thick, systematic theology. Now I just use that as a reference, and I don't really need the other ones. But just having that simple starting point without any pressure, really. You're just reading it and you're just trying to understand. I think that's super helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, we need to make sure that whatever we're doing, it's not only sustainable, but that we enjoy it. Christianity should not be this dull thing that we're doing to check off of a list. It should be something that is exciting to us, that we love to do. And I'm not saying you're going to love everything you study, but it should all be enriching your life in such a way that Christ seems more glorious to you at the end of your study. Maybe not every day, but at the end of the full study at the very least.
I appreciate the check here, actually, because it's a state of being. Like, Christianity is a state of being. It's a lifestyle. It's not like we're just goal-oriented people. Like, we live and we breathe and we have our being in God through Christ. And that's the wonder of Christianity, the new creation in Christ. So I appreciate the check on that. So we've talked through the moment we're currently in with the recent election of Donald Trump. Some of our perspectives on that we discussed. We went through the opportunity that we now have and some of the things that we think we ought to be doing to take advantage of this. And then, one of those was persuading people and using the Word of God and bringing it to bear in every area of life in a way that is persuasive to people is very important. And then, Nick, you were just pointing out just now that needs to be a sustainable practice for us. It's not something that we can, a lot of times, and my tendency is to just go all into something and then to burn out a little bit and then have periods where I'm not as productive. And I think it's healthier to have a steady, sustainable practice of development, as you were saying, rather than these times of just excessive focus. So the last bit that I kind of want to work through with you guys is, and we're thinking of this concept of mission. Last episode was worship. This episode is mission. And mission has the sense of activity associated with it. Like, what are we doing? What's our purpose? Where are we going? What's our direction? And so all of that is kind of wrapped up in the things we're discussing in society. But now, what are you guys thinking about in terms of mission in your households, with your families, with your wives, and with yourselves personally? And the reason I think this is something important to discuss is all of those things that we were talking about in society are all great things. But if we're not taking care of our families first and foremost, then we could do so much outside of our household and we could lose the very ground that God has given us to take, which is right in our households with our wives and our children. And we can get so distracted with things that are outside and we can neglect the sheep that God has given us to shepherd. So what are we doing in our households and personally to develop ourselves and our wives? What's the direction you want to see your household go?
Yeah, it's a good question. So yeah, I think starting with what is the chief end of man is a good place. Man's chief end is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever. Now, that starts with the self. I think that every believer, first and foremost, whether you are married, whether you're not married, whether you have kids, whatever, you need to make sure that you are walking with the Lord properly. So if you are in the Word daily, if you're in prayer daily, if you're not legalistic about it, if you have great confidence in the faith because you're walking according to the Scriptures, and when you test yourself, you do find that you have that assurance, that's a very good thing. And I think the personal piety aspect is important because it's really the well from which we draw when we're pouring out to do the work of God into anybody else. If I'm close to God, I'm going to have a deeper well to draw from as I'm serving other people. And it's not our strength we're doing those things in. I mean, just think about it. If you have a really bad day at work, you're not in the Word, you're like an exposed nerve. And the first thing that touches you is going to feel the wrath of your anger, so to speak. And you're not likely to respond well. But now let's reframe this. Let's say you woke up that morning, you spend some time in the Word, spend some time in prayer, you go to work, you listen to a Christian podcast on the way or something. You're calibrating your mind, you're calibrating your heart for the day. It's a rough day at work, you get through it. On the way home, you listen to a podcast or something, you pray for strength to serve your family. Since we know that as husbands and fathers, our job doesn't really end when we get home. We don't just throw our feet up, listen to the radio, turn the sports ball on, and then wait for our wife to deliver us a tray of food.
Serve me.
Yeah, we go and we serve our family. Our wives have been serving our children. It's our time to serve them and give them a rest as much as we're able to. And so if you are walking with God and doing these godly things, calibrating your mind, setting your mind on Christ, and you come home to a mess, like you're going to be much less likely to respond in a sinful way. You're going to be much more likely to take a breath and then serve Christ through it.
And this is really the idea of Sabbath, because we take 1 day in 7 and we set it apart. And that 1 day in 7 that we're taking to set apart, we do on God's example, because that's what he did when he created the earth. But what we're doing when we do that is we're saying everything that I have comes from God. Everything. So I have worked for 6 days. I am not going to work on this 7th day, because this is the day that I'm taking to remember that everything that I have comes from God. And so then I'm looking at God with the right perspective, which then frames how I do everything else in the remainder of that week. And so what you're saying, it is touching on that, I think, really well, because whenever you are digging into the Word, you're praying, you're listening to something, you're calibrating, like you said, your mind on the right things, then you're going to be in a position spiritually, which will then impact you emotionally and physically, temperamentally, to come home with the right attitude towards your family, rather than a fleshly attitude, which we're so prone to fall into that way of thinking. It's just natural. Whenever I come home from a hard day of work, it's so easy to think of like, I just went through XYZ at work. The last thing I want to do when I get home is fix the faucet, something like that. But that's what we're called to as men, and that's what the point you're making.
And the other danger to that is, let's say you are respected at work, you come home, things are a mess, and then your wife doesn't respect you as much, or your kids don't respect you as much as the people that work with you. And then that creates a whole host of other temptations to, want to be at the office more, or want to do this more, want to do that more. Because sometimes it's hard to lay down your life for people that don't appreciate you. Or maybe they do, and you just think too highly of yourself. But
right.
So that would be my first answer. You have to make sure that you and God are right. You have to make sure that you are consecrated properly in that way for the rest of your liturgy in your life. I think if you're married beyond that, then you have to, be a loving spouse to your spouse. You have to, if you're a father or a mother, then you have to focus on that relationship as well. So I would say Christian, husband or wife, then parents. And then if you're performing in all those areas well, you're doing family worship, you're washing your wife with the water of the Word. Again, your kids, you're doing similar things, raising them up in the fear and admonition of the Lord, singing psalms with them, exposing them to the whole counsel of God, memorization, catechism. And again, I don't do all these things perfectly. I don't even do all these things necessarily with my kids. We haven't catechized in quite a while, which is something we want to get back to. But, these are all things you can be doing for the good of your family. And from my perspective, I forget how the phrase goes, but I think the way it goes is, so goes the family, so goes the church, so goes the church, so goes society.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if they flip church and family, but I think the family is the primary unit that goes first.
Yes.
And the reason for that is because the church is made up of families. So if we have good, strong, vibrant families, your leaders are going to be joyfully serving you without a whole lot of friction, because you're going to be a joy to lead. Whereas if you have a church that's filled with families who aren't doing what they're supposed to, with people who aren't calibrating their hearts to God, who aren't trying to be close to God in their piety, how do you lead a horse to water and force it to drink? It's just not something you can do. The families in the church, the people that make up those families, need to want to fellowship with God for a pastor to be able to lead them well.
Yeah, and I think a way that we can say this is having an attitude of self-sacrifice, as men particularly, right? I mean, so Doug Wilson makes this point in, I think it's the book My Life for Yours, Tour of a Christian Household. And that's the theme of the book, My Life for Yours, and that's the Christian attitude. We're giving our life for our families. And that's why whenever we go to work, we do come home and we do then serve our families at home also, not just whenever we go to work, because it's our life for their life. But the typical, I would say, fleshly, non-Christian attitude is not one of sacrificial service towards other people. It's one of trying to diminish the amount of responsibility you have towards other people and maintain as much of the things that you can take for yourself as possible without giving anything in response. It's just inherently selfish. My follow-up question would be...
Real quick, can I just say one other thing?
Certainly, yes.
So if we are doing those things, if we are setting ourselves apart properly for the work of daily life, for the daily liturgy we have, and we are ordering our households well according to Deuteronomy 6 and doing the things all throughout the scriptures that we are commanded to do, that is how ultimately we are going to have vibrant churches and how we are going to be vibrant in society.
Yes.
I think I said it before, but by the time my children leave my household, my goal is that they would have, at the very minimum, like a 1-year Bible program degree of knowledge, like in some college somewhere. Like, my kids should leave my house as adults, not only as competent individuals who know how to think, but people that are intimately familiar with the word and how to apply it to their lives. And if we are doing our job as parents to do this, then when our kids get into society, this vision of small town community, or it doesn't have to be small town, whatever community you live in, being engaged there, digging in roots there, making it better, and then becoming a cornerstone of the community for the gospel, while also serving in your church and doing all these things that we should be doing in that side of our life as well. That's how we become faithful to, raise families and children that are then going to impact society. So it's not just ourselves, but it's our whole family. It's a family endeavor.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and that's really great. If you could put that into an exhortative fashion, like, so tell me, since I'm your average American, I want a to-do list. Mm-hmm. What's my tasks?
I would say...
And I'll put it in context. Just say I'm a young man. I'm about to be married. I have no kids. I have a job. But I'm looking forward to marriage and I want to build a household. What am I supposed to do?
If I were going to exhort you right now with no prep, I would say spend as much time as you can in the Word and in prayer. Know your God as well as you can, and then seek to apply those principles to your life. If you're a man with a trade or a skill that's unique that you can leverage, I would encourage you to not trade your time for money, but to build an empire, whatever that can look like, so that you are not reliant on somebody else for your income and for your livelihood. Because if you're an owner, then you can affect a lot more change for Christ, because you're not beholden to another person in the same way, which is significant. So I would go hard at something for a career. Again, consistent with Scripture, draw as close as you can to God, and be building into and building up in your church and your local community as much as you can, while again also preparing for these other stages of life that are coming around the corner.
Yeah, with kids and whatnot. Yeah, that's very good. Yeah. Anything you would add to that, Josh? We'll start with the exhortation first. So, young man, about to be married. We'll say he's just getting into a new career. What would be your, okay, this is your to-do list, young man. Make sure you get on this.
Well, it would probably be something similar to this whole idea of where does mission start, and it's the idea that it has to start in and work its way out. You cannot be effective to a future bride, future children, your future coworkers, your boss. You cannot work outwardly until you have really done well inwardly. Or I should say, you aren't going to do well outwardly until you are doing well inwardly. You must be poured into in order to be poured out. And that does require actually being in the presence of God. And we do that through prayer and being in a word. I can tell you myself that I did not change and did not take my walk with the Lord seriously and start to see actual effectual change in my life, beyond maybe some surfacey stuff, until I consistently was reading my Bible every morning when I got up. When I was not doing that, I would get in the flesh so easily because I was not saturated with God's word. It was not a constant reminder to me. And when I started to read the scriptures and being in God's presence, it gets your mind basically dialed in the way that it should be to start the day. And it gets your focus on what is important. In a sense, you're kind of looking through your day through the proper lens. When you don't, especially early on, like there's days even now, like I might miss a day here or there, and it's not to the same effect, but that's because I've done years of being in God's word. But early on, when I first started reading consistently, the days I didn't, I could tell. Like there was a definite difference in my demeanor, my attitude, my outlook. It affected it, and I would remember, I didn't read today. And so that did have a big impact, not having that. And it's because you didn't have God's word being sown in you so that it could grow and bear fruit. Now, having done that for 20 plus years, you have well-grounded roots, you have good vegetation taking place, and there's fruit that comes out of that. And even if there's days you miss, you still have the deep-rooted past 20 years that you're feeding off of. So it's very important. And I know pastors say it all the time. Even when I would teach to the congregation, I stress it so much that, guys, be in the Word, be in the Word, be in the Word. Prayer is just, it's right there. I do struggle with that. I do really struggle to pray and how to pray. And, I know part of that is eloquence. The other part of it is just that repetitive prayer, like where it's just, you're just praying the same thing. I do pray the Lord's Prayer probably every other morning, but I don't just pray it. I digest every part of it, and I try to put it in my own words and how I can apply it and approach it that way, so that it's actually meaningful and I'm thinking about it. Otherwise, it does just become robotic. But we do that with our own individual prayers. Our kids pray that way. We see that with our kids. Like their prayer is the same, and it doesn't change. And it's like, okay, you can say a little something different this time, but we can fall into that same trap.
My daughter Clara, every time I say, what are you thankful for? She says, I'm thankful for my family and my boots. Every time.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And I mean, I got older kids, and I'll get the same thing. Like when we go around, what were you thankful for? I'll get the same answer sometimes from one or two of them. It's always the same. It's like, okay, or like it's just like deep thought. Like, I'm like, you do realize, like if somebody said, if you got a hard time thinking about what you're thankful for, okay, just think of something if it was taken away from you today, and how much that would affect you if it was taken away from you today. That's how much you should be giving thanks for that thing that be taken away. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated here.
Let me ask you one thing. You were saying that whenever, like early on when you started reading the Word, you really knew if you didn't read it. And you and Nick both kind of touched on this calibration kind of idea where you're getting into the Word, and then that's kind of getting your mind in the right space. Can you flesh that out a little bit in terms of why do you think it's so important especially when you're early on in your walk with the Lord, or we could say it this way, you're early on in your Christian life. Why do you think it's so important to be in the Word of God so frequently?
Well, I mean, you think of a plant. The early stages of plant growth are crucial. Just like when I mentioned how now 20 years later, if I miss a day here or there, it doesn't affect me as much.
Mm-hmm.
If a drought comes to a land, a plant that was planted 3 weeks ago will not endure a drought like a full-grown tree can endure that same drought.
Mm-hmm.
Because like water, the Bible is referred to as, we washing in the water of the Word.
That's right.
And so when you are not, and early on in your life, you are that seed that you're just sprouting up. So the proper sunlight, the proper soil, the proper amount of water is necessary, and nutrients to a tender plant. You have to have, it's much more crucial to a young plant than it is to an older plant. The older plant has had the nourishment. The younger plant has had the right temperature and the right moisture and the right soil, and it has allowed it to grow to the size that it is so that when troubles do come, it can handle it and endure it. But a young plant doesn't have that ability. So it's very important to supply that. And so as a young believer, when you start reading the Word, you're doing that. Sometimes we use the same reference with people that, we tell kids, make sure you're drinking your milk so you get your calcium.
Right.
Well, I don't feel my bones getting stronger. Well, it doesn't matter. By doing this, they are getting stronger, whether you feel it or not. You're doing this because based on truth and based on the experience of other people you've seen, that this works.
And so when you're in the Word as a new believer, you're actually in God's communication to you.
Mm-hmm.
And if what we're recognizing when we become a Christian is that God is God and we're His creatures and we have a relationship with Him through Christ, and that the very means of communication that God has given to His people, which is the Word, whenever that's removed, then what you're saying is that we are then removing the source of nutrient and life and water that would be the life-sustaining element for this plant.
Mm-hmm.
You're removing that, and then if a drought comes, this already unstable new life can be snuffed out so easily because of that adversity.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point. Calibrating your mind individually, especially as a new believer, but then training our kids to do that then. And so we're kind of providing that environment that is well nourished and has all the things that they need to be a flourishing plant. And so then we're trying to train up our kids to have that already done by the time they're leaving the household, so that they can be a well-established plant by the time they're leaving. But even for us then, we have to make sure that we're daily still calibrating our minds, and we're reprioritizing our lives in a way that's honoring to God's Word. And like you said, if you do this consistently, then, you miss a day, you fall, you have a rough day at work with stress or whatever the case may be. It's not going to hit you as hard as somebody who hasn't had years of nourishment.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yep.
Yeah, that's all really good stuff. So, I mean, we went through...
Can I add one other comment?
Yeah, sure.
I was just thinking about it while we were going through everything else. If I could say, if you are a husband and you have a wife and you have children, my exhortation to you would be different than the single guy who's getting prepared. And it would just be this. I would treat every day like it's preparation for battle. Because, we live in a peaceful country now. We live in America. We don't have to worry about, fighting for our faith or being persecuted for our faith. And because of the red tsunami, I don't think we have to worry about that now. I was a little bit concerned. But at any rate, we still should be preparing ourselves and training ourselves up for war, training our wives up, training our kids up. And the way that I view that is, my goal is, if I were to die tomorrow, that my kids and my wife wouldn't be lost without me. Like, yes, they'd be sad, they'd be hurt, they'd go to God in prayer, but they would be competent enough because of the way that I led, because of the way that I raised my family up, that they could keep running this ship without me, because they're not grounded upon Dad, they're grounded upon Christ. And that is the rock that I was standing on, same rock that they're standing on. So, yeah, husbands, fathers, if you were to die tomorrow, or today, are your wives, are your children, is your wife and are your children, sorry. Anyway, are they in a place where you're comfortable and confident in their ability to exist without your leadership and under the leadership of your wife?
That's true of elders too.
It's very true of elders. Yep.
And maybe even more so, but because the church as an institution, God does not need the men that are currently leading it in order to accomplish His will. He will accomplish His will, but we ought never think that the kingdom of heaven is not going to advance unless I'm there. Mm-hmm. So we need to be preparing the church as elders to continue on, even if we were not there.
Yep.
And they need to be able to discern truth. They need to be able to give an answer for the reason of the hope that is in them with meekness and fear. They need to be able to work out their own salvation with fear and trembling, like all those things that they need to be equipped to do, so that we don't end up in I'm going to use a word here, pseudo-sacerdotalism, where they only feel as though they're having a true religious experience only whenever the elders are facilitating that. We need to be equipping the sheep to know that they have only one mediator between God and man, the man Jesus Christ, and they can't have access to the throne just like everybody else does. So if the elders leave or the elders die or they fall, God forbid, because we're all sinful people, if any of those things happen, the ship won't be rocked, because they're going to know that their stability is not found in the ones that are currently leading the church. And I think that's true of the household, which is your point. We need to be leading our families in such a way so that if God took us out of the equation, then they're ready to go. They're going to be able to handle that. They can cope with it. Not going to be pleasant, but they won't lose their faith over it, and the ship will still sail in the right direction.
Which is the signs of a healthy church.
Amen.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Because, you can see them where there's people that it's not a church fellowship, it's just a celebrity pastor. And the minute that celebrity is gone or falls, it's disaster. The church falls apart. And that goes to show you that it really wasn't as healthy as you thought it was. It was just you're following this man. You're following a fallen man rather than him being that person that is pointing you to Christ.
Yes.
As he should be.
That's right.
Yeah. Is the shepherd or shepherds in your church raising men up to be men in the home, leaders in the home, and leaders in the church if need be? Or are the people not in your church not changing? If the people in your church aren't growing in grace and truth, and they're not being sanctified, and they're leeching off of the pastor, so to speak, then find a new church. Talk to your pastor, but probably find a new church, because that's there's a good chance that the pastor is wanting you to be codependent upon him at that point if the people in your church aren't growing. And some leaders prefer that. Some leaders think that they should be the mediator between God and man. Some preachers think that they should create people in their image instead of encouraging people to become in the likeness of Christ. And I think that they would get into that headspace by saying, Paul said, imitate me as I imitate Christ, but not most of us aren't Paul. So,
but we should be living lives that people can imitate.
Absolutely. But yeah, in particular, I've been under a leader who tried to make a bunch of little hymns, and it became more about him than Christ, it appeared.
Yes, and I think that is always a danger. Well, That's always going to be a danger, especially if a person is gaining a following, particularly, or they're seeing that their influence is growing over people. Then the tendency is always going to be, wow, I'm pretty great. I need to make sure I'm leading these people into all truth.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just the tendency, and so we have to guard against that. But that's part of the reason that living in community with God's people is so important, because I rely on you, brothers, to keep me accountable. You rely on us. We all rely on each other to keep each other accountable. Whenever we're getting a big head, the other two will just knock us down a few notches. That's what's supposed to happen.
Yep.
It's a healthy give and take community where we keep each other accountable. Iron sharpening iron, in the way that I was raised to think of that being meant. I was told by a pastor once that that's actually not. So it was not supposed to be a positive thing. It was supposed to be. It was a negative thing. But
okay,
that's maybe for another time. But all right. Any clothing? Any closing thoughts here on this idea of mission? Anything that you guys want to address before we wrap it up?
The only thing I can think of is thinking about I mentioned the Lord's Prayer. It calls on us to pray for our daily bread, and that, just as I mentioned before, let's use all the cliches here. Right? How do we climb a mountain? One step at a time. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. When we look at mission, we can look at the really big scope, but it comes down to taking it one day at a time and not trying to do everything at once. That's, I think, something we get into. I can even fall headlong into that. And then that becomes overwhelming, and then you just give up and do nothing.
Yes.
So it comes down to, okay, we've talked about a lot of things, but start with something small.
Yes.
Something that this is way easier. I know I can handle more. Regardless of that, start with something small, something you're going to be able to do. We do this in fitness too.
Yes.
Where, don't go out and do a workout that's going to make you not be able to move for the next 5 days and then you give up.
Yes.
Start small and work your way into it. And that would be my encouragement. I need to remind myself of that. But that would be where we start, is start with something small. If you're like, even what I mentioned earlier about the single guy, or it doesn't even have to be a single guy, just reading your Bible. Like take 10 minutes in the morning and read a chapter. Start with something small and work your way up there. And again, that's starting inwardly, and it's going to eventually work its way out to a wife if you have one, children if you have them, and to your work, etc.
Yes.
So it's starting small. There's a lot that can be done, but you need to start number one with the first step. So
yeah, and our context, and my wife and I were talking about this during the election. There was one of the groups, might have been Associated Press, some of them, they were like 3 minutes behind everybody else whenever they called a state. And I think Ben Shapiro's like, yeah, they're like old news. They're behind, whatever. And my wife said, isn't it amazing that just like a matter of minutes is old news and behind? We live in a context where information flies so fast. We are blessed to have a pretty much a bird's eye view of our entire nation, which is huge. And because of that, we can tend to think cosmically about everything that needs to get done. And we forget that we have these very simple things that we need to be doing, and we need to be doing them consistently. One of them is just being in the Word of God. And then as we're nourishing ourselves with the Word, then we're able to pour out, like you said, to our families and to our coworkers and all of those people that are several places and relations, in the words of the Westminster. So it's very easy to get overwhelmed. It's very easy to then not do anything. So having that laser focus on these small tasks that I know I can do and do them consistently is super crucial. So I think that's a great word. I was going to say I'm doing that right now because I tend towards that all or nothing thinking. And if I'm either going to do everything or it's not even worth it because I'm not doing everything, And so in fitness is a big one for me because I don't often want to take the time away from other things to focus on my health as far as exercise.
Right.
So just doing some push-ups every day before I take a shower. Other than on Sunday, I give myself a day off on Sunday. But every day before I take a shower, I just try to do a set of push-ups. And that's just like one thing. And then from there, it's gotten to, okay, well, how many can I get up to? So then trying to build up a number. And then it's like you're building off of those successes. That's how it starts. You got to start with something that's sustainable. It gets back to the sustainability piece. And something that you can accomplish. That's something that's very attainable.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. So we covered a lot of ground, but I think a good practical start towards mission. We have an opportunity that the Lord has graciously given our nation by allowing Donald Trump to be elected, and in so doing, putting us in a position where there's going to be Christians crawling around the White House now. Whereas with a Harris-Walz regime, that would not have been the case. So the Lord has been very gracious to our nation through this. So trying to build on that momentum, being present for our families, growing ourselves, being present for our church, and then going out and being present in the community and persuading people, being active in government. I think those are all really good things that we can just be thinking about as a community. Some things coming up. We have only a couple of weeks before the Advent season begins, and that is the beginning of the church calendar. That's December 1st this year, which is Sunday. So we've got some things coming up within our community here in Western New York, like Christmas caroling. We're hopefully going to invade Warsaw with some Christmas caroling, so we got to be practicing for that. My wife is going to be doing some candy making with the ladies in December, so that'll be fun. And then we'll have our Christmas feast to look forward to on Christmas Eve. So any other events you guys want to highlight coming up?
No, I'm just looking forward to actually doing some of these things and coming out of the Calvary Chapel. Like, we didn't follow any of this church calendar stuff.
It's nice, isn't it? It's like a good reminder.
It's all brand new.
Yeah, Christ's life, and it's festive. And
I mentioned it to you before. I think it was before, obviously, I started fellowshipping with you guys, but hearing that you wear red on, is it Pentecost? Pentecost Sunday, you wear red?
Yep, I think that's right.
And I put a post out there because somebody had mentioned it, and me and one other lady from the church, we were like, we got our red on today. But it's nothing you ever heard about, so it's fun to be part of that.
What did you think of our All Saints celebration we did?
It was good. It was a nice time. Obviously, I was disappointed that my son was sick, so that my wife and him couldn't be there with me and my two daughters, but it was a nice event to do, and also just to have a lot of different churches there, and being our first event, I thought it went off really well.
I agree.
And and having different church participation, it would be great to see more people. I think probably each of us would say maybe people we've invited actually come, but they're few and far between. It's just a reality.
I think a future episode for us is going to be on culture. And culture within the church, building culture in a community, in a household, like all of that. And the reason I'm saying that is the ladies were just like awesome for this event. I mean, they all came together. They did so much stuff. Mm-hmm. The decorations were amazing. Your family made those really awesome little baggies with Chex Mix in them.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So good.
It's like it could not have happened without the ladies turning it into, like, that space looked so beautiful, and and if you walk up there just on a day to day, it's not like the most attractive space,
right? Yep.
But it looked great. And then Emily taking the pictures, which were amazing. It's like that. Everything about the night was just so great, and the women brought the culture to that event. We just basically showed up. That's really what happened. And then we showed up, we talked, we sang some songs, but the ladies are the ones that brought the heart and the soul to the event, and it was great. So this is a shout out to the ladies of Covenant Reformed Church and all the hard work that they put into the All Saints Feast.
And then Nick's wife had to bring in, the next saint.
Yeah, exactly,
on the same day.
exactly.
So,
On the same day. That's so great. Yes. For those of you who don't know, Nick's first son was born on All Saints Day. And so he did leave the hospital to come and give us an exhortation or a homily on All Saints, which
Nick
was very
did, not
informative.
Griffin.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, not Griffin.
Right. Yes.
That would have been impressive.
But,
well, the thing at the end of the day was it was our first event, and I had seen photos of the space, and how could I not? If I had the capacity, and I did, if my wife wasn't doing well or Griffin hadn't been doing well, I wouldn't have gone. But given how much everybody had invested into this event and how much work we collectively had put into it, especially the ladies, like you said, how could I not show up and try to be a blessing just by being there and appreciating what they did? So
yeah. Well, we appreciated you being there.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was a good first event for us. We had close to 50 people there, and some that we had planned on being there, others that we hadn't planned on being there, and we were happy to have them. It was just a great time of fellowship.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for the time.
Yeah, good talk.
thank you.
Good talk. Until next time.